Hello, everyone. This is Deborah Rue, and this is Human Potential at Work. I am the CEO of Rue Global Communications, and we are consultants, brand ambassadors, market influencers, trainers for the community of people with disabilities. So we like telling the really empowering stories about what people with disabilities are doing to change the world. And today, you're going to love this episode. Now, this is going to be a second episode, which we had promised, coming from the Kennedy Center. We're very impressed with what the Kennedy Center is doing. And I had Betty, who's on again today. Betty, I encourage you to go back and watch her episode. It was episode 112, Equity in the Arts. It was a wonderful program. And if you don't know about the zebra, if you watch the program or listen to the program, you'll know more about what I meant with the zebra. But Betty, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Deborah. It's a delight to be here with you and two of my favorite artists.
Yes, I know. And why don't you introduce the two artists that are on the show today?
Well, we have two of our VSA Emerging Young Artists joining us. We have Victoria Duggar, who's joining us from Atlanta, Georgia, and Kip Henderson, who's joining us from California, I think from the beautiful city of LA, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And they have both been winners in our Emerging Young Artist competition, which means that their work has risen to the top as being some of the stellar work by young artists in the United States.
Wow, so exciting. So, Betty, for those that have not seen the previous episode, and we are almost at 150 episodes, yay, but why don't you take a minute and introduce yourself, and then let's let Victoria introduce herself and talk a little bit about her art, and then Kip will just follow what we started. But sure. Betty, tell us more about who you are,
right,
and why, what the Kennedy Center is doing, because it's very impressive.
Absolutely. So my name is Betty Siegel, and I'm the Director of VSA and Accessibility here at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. And some of my favorite programming that we are empowered to do to exemplify President Kennedy's commitments to diversity and inclusion and equity and access is to bring up and highlight the amazing work by artists with disabilities across the United States and around the world. One of the programs that we're really trying to look at today is our VSA Emerging Young Artists program, which is totally 100% supported by the amazing generosity of Volkswagen Group of America. I can't tell you how grateful we are to their ongoing support. I think we're going into our 19th year of support from VW. Now, Victoria and Kip, I love having them because they represent two different cadres of artists. Victoria's work was featured in our exhibit Reinvention. She was our first prize winner, which is really amazing. And then we have Kip, who's in our current cadre of artist winners. So that exhibition called Detour is out in the community now, beginning its national tour, and it's in Boston. And Kip was was a winner of our Excellence Award. So he also has some amazing work. We have a lot of different kind of programming at VSA and Accessibility. We do the lifespan. So the zebra that Deborah refers to is a piece of artwork by a young artist through his special education classroom. And so we're now looking at the other end of the spectrum of artists that we deal with, which are emerging artists 16 to 25 years of age. So I will throw it over to Victoria to introduce herself and talk about her art.
Thanks, Betty.
I'm Victoria Duggar. I won the first prize, like Betty said. And I don't know, the Kennedy Center has been so amazing in helping me get different opportunities with my art. I was kind of nervous about applying to the program, actually, to the competition. And I was like, I think I'm going to go ahead and do it. Because it just seemed so, my work is already about disability and how I interact with the world through my disability and how people see me. And I mostly do portraiture and things like that. So I've continued to work in the arts since the Kennedy Center, and which was an amazing opportunity.
And Kip?
Yeah, my name is Kip Henderson, and I am a comic book artist. I applied for the Kennedy Center VSA program because I had a few short personal comics that dealt with my disability. They're just lighthearted and fun, and I'm aiming to answer the questions that people don't know to ask. A lot of people ask a lot of the technical questions because that's like what presents itself. But I think a lot of people are wondering what's day-to-day life like as a person with disability. And that's something that I hope to answer with my personal comics. And then for my job, I work with internet star digital magician Zach King. And he's hired me on to produce comic books for him. So that's what I do professionally now.
So Deborah, what's really exciting about both these artists is not only is their artwork exemplary and truly top-notch and amazing, it's that they both are actively pursuing careers in the arts, either through the production of their artwork itself, or like Kip said, has been commissioned in essence to create artwork for another artist. And Victoria, you are currently working at the High Museum, which is a very reputable art museum in Georgia, and then doing your work.
Yes. Yeah, so working at the High has been amazing. I think that them kind of implementing a lot. They had a VSA conference here just a little while ago, so I was able to meet more wonderful people from the Kennedy Center, and I love working in programming. And one of my favorite programs here at the High is Musing Together, and that's a program that's in partnership with the Alzheimer's Association. So I feel like I'm continuing, what the Kennedy Center allowed me to see about myself is that kind of my not just personal connection to disability, but professional as well.
Good. That's some good points. Kip, do you want to weigh in on this particular? It's interesting. Yeah, often, I know people will say you can't make a living being an artist. Well, you and Victoria are sort of proving that to be not the case. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, in regards to my career as an artist, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm currently an independent contractor, and I started off as an internship for King Studio, transitioned into independent contractor, and pretty soon I'll be full-time salary. I love working there. I love the community. It's just a really tight-knit group of people, and we're all passionate about creating quality content. So I absolutely love working in the arts. I take my sketchbook with me everywhere. I'm just constantly drawing. And so to be able to do that for work is a huge blessing.
Yes. And, I think it's really interesting. That's one reason why I love what the Kennedy Center is doing, because it is, they're able to shine a light on artists like you. And I just think that's very important. And I know, Kip, we can see if you're watching this, and some people will be listening to it, but those of us that are watching it we can see some of your artwork in the back. And we're going to provide links to their artwork so that everybody, can view it. But it's very impressive work. So I'm so glad that you were able to be part of what the Kennedy Center are doing so that they can highlight top emerging talents like you and Victoria. So let me ask you a couple of questions. And so as Kip, since right now you're on my screen, I'll start with you. Tell us more about your art, the medium you work in, but also how do you think being a person with a disability adds or maybe even subtracts? I assume it doesn't subtract. I think it probably is going to add, but tell us how really bringing in really who you are as an individual impacts your work. And then Victoria, I'm going to ask you the same question. So Kip, you go first.
Yeah, for sure. So I primarily do most of my comic book work on my iPad. It's entirely portable. They have really great apps for art making. So I do most of my work digitally and on the iPad. As a person with disability, I was never the kid running around doing sports, that kind of thing. Growing up, I had my art desk that I would work at every day, just making crafts and stuff like that. So really, my disability has enabled me to really emphasize and pursue art. And then on top of that, growing up, especially as a child, a lot of people would see me, and the first thing that they would notice about me was my disability. And that was sort of the box they would put me in right off the bat. And so around the time of high school, I'd really been pursuing art. And I started to notice that people started noticing my art before my disability. They would appreciate the work that I was doing and be interested in me in that regard. And that was really special that I was able to present myself as talented and intelligent. And I was able to use my art both to share something about myself and forge relationships and just to bring more beauty into the world.
Powerful. Victoria, do you want to answer the question?
Yes, so I primarily work in sculpture and painting and drawing, but mostly sculpture now. I think since, I don't know, when I kind of transitioned into sculpture is when I transitioned into really having a lot of self-reflection and kind of looking at myself. I was in kind of a growing pain situation of being in college and trying to find myself, one would say. And I had always, like Kip said, realized that people saw my disability before they saw who I was. And I was like, that's so odd, because I feel as though I and many people with disabilities and all people are three-dimensional and should be seen that way. And I focus on the body and trying to showcase not just the disabled body as beautiful and complex, but a bigger body that we're all connected and that everyone goes through something. It doesn't have to be necessarily a physical disability, or I don't need to be having a bad day that day, but to just, I feel like I want my work to remind people that we're all human and we're all fragile, but we're also strong and durable. And I think that's something very beautiful.
Oh, well said. Well said. I've talked about this many times on my show, but I don't know that any of us want to have somebody determine who we are based on one component of who we are. So you can say, well, Deborah, you're old. So it's like, well, but there's a whole lot more to me than that, right? I mean, I'm now, I guess, an elder. No, I'm definitely an elder these days. But there's so much more to who I am. And so, I was in a discussion the other day. I was on a panel speaking, and there was a young woman, she was 21 years old, that had a visible disability. And she said, and it just amazes me that people say stupid stuff, but people come up to her all the time and they say, someday when you die and you go to God, you won't have this disability anymore. God will heal you. And it really makes her mad. And she said, God will heal me? What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with me. And she just really owns who she is. And that is very, very beautiful to me, because I do see the young people seem to really be better about owning who you are as individuals. And I think, once again, that's why I want to applaud and support the work that Betty and her team are doing, because I think we all, especially as some of us that have access now to people through our careers, it is our jobs to make sure that people know about the Kips and the Victorias of the world. And we really let you speak to the world through your own medium, whatever that is. And you and Kip happen to be artists, and you're expressing yourself through your art. But if the Kennedy Center isn't there to help you, make sure that people know about your work, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And that's one reason why I love the conversations. Betty, I don't know if you want to weigh in a little bit more about why is this so important?
Oh, the thing is again, I love this opportunity that you provide us, Deborah, to really highlight the work of two of the artists that we find, first of all, to be great representatives of artists generally, and then in particular artists with disabilities, because they both are so open about talking about how their identity and affects or influences or is a really important part of their work. I think that these programs and the Artist Society are critical because they show us who we are. They show our humanity in a way that nobody else really can. And the opportunity to bring visibility to their work that Volkswagen Group of America helps us do as well is essential. Kennedy talks about, one of my favorite quotes from President Kennedy is the one where he speaks to the fact that after ages have passed and the dust of wars has settled, what we're going to be remembered for is our human spirit. And I think that these artists and the other programs that we provide that highlight the voices of and raise up the visibility of visual artists through the Emerging Young Artists program, or our musicians through our International Young Soloist program, or our playwrights through our playwriting programs, I think all of those are ways in which we deepen and enrich American culture.
I agree.
Now, Kip and Victoria, you may not think of it that way.
You're changing history. You're changing history.
I believe that artists can change the world. And I believe that, for example, Victoria's work as a sculptor and her look at bodies is really exciting. And Kip's work as a comic artist, I never can remember how we refer to the comic artist, is also another way of looking at our world. And then the piece that I think is really important that both Victoria and Kip bring in such an exciting way is that they both are working in the arts. And that
which is hard to do. Right, that's hard to do. That's not an easy feat for any artist. No. Let me pick up on a point, because I want to give a big old shout out to VW, because the reality is, if brands like VW of America are not supporting programs like this, we don't get to learn about Kip's amazing work and Victoria. And, maybe and hopefully Kip would have made it on his own without the support.
Oh my gosh, yes.
They're so talented. But programs like this are so important. And right now, as we're recording this show, disability inclusion is on the world stage at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And we're talking about disability inclusion, real inclusion. And they actually came up with a word, and I can't even say the word yet, but they're sort of in very funny ways with videos, a little bit making fun of corporations that say that they want to include people with disabilities in their organizations, but they don't. And so you look at somebody, I'll just pick on Kip right now. So you look at somebody like Kip, that he is so talented. His artwork is just gorgeous. And you think about all the ways that would benefit a corporate brand and the sculptures and stuff that Victoria is doing. These are two individuals that they are working and they are in the space, but a corporate brand, how could you not be tripping over yourselves to hire these talented individuals? I mean, they bring so much to the table. And so there's a lot of, and I think it's just that people and corporations don't understand the value that we really bring to the table. And of course, disabilities can be very confusing. Many people have disabilities and they're invisible disabilities. And so you can't get the physical cues to say, oh, we have disability in the room, which is why it's so important to include people like Kip and Victoria that have physical disabilities that we can see and understand, not say, oh, Kip's not talented, because that's ridiculous, but to say, wow, Kip is so talented. And oh, by the way, isn't it cool that Kip has a disability too? I wonder, because my first thought when I'm looking at Kip's work is, how has his life impacted his art? And what has he learned? And what is he showing us through his art? And we learn so much in society by our arts. And so I get really, really stoked and excited about it. And I think it's all of our jobs. It's Volkswagen's job. It's Betty, it's your job. It's my job. It's Doug Forest's job, our producer behind the scenes, to make sure that we are shining the light on the Kips and the Victorias of the world. So why don't we step back and see what they can do? Why don't we give them a chance and see how they can change the world, which they're doing already. So I get really excited about these topics. So Kip and Victoria, let's turn the floor back over to you. So Victoria, we'll start with you. But, I know that you both are, experiencing and seeing what we see, that a lot of times people see disability as a negative instead of understanding it's really part of being a very powerful human being and learning to experience the world in different ways. And so how, when you look at, how the world is including or is not really including people with disabilities in meaningful ways, Victoria, what do you hope for the future and how are you blending that into your art? And then Kip, I'm going to ask you the same question. Victoria?
That's a great question, Deborah. I actually heard this quote the other day on NPR, and that diversity doesn't necessarily mean representation. I think that's so important, but because companies or the community that you find yourself in can be diverse, but not necessarily presenting and celebrating differences that are within that community. And I think that the way that I know Microsoft has an initiative now that hires people with disabilities, I think with autism, and saying that, man, these people have qualities and characteristics that are far beyond a lot of the people that we interview, and that it's seen as so much more of a pro than it is a con, and they have a different interviewing tactic. And I think kind of integrating people with disabilities into everyday life is so important, because I think if you're not comfortable, if you're not seeing people with disabilities lead normal lives, and that they obviously do, it can kind of create a wall there, can create a barrier for communication. And I think that what I intend to do with my artwork is to create more inclusive environments. I feel that I'm moving towards installations and kind of breaking down architectural boundaries because I think that is what hinders people from coming together and seeing people with disabilities, seeing people from different backgrounds and ethnicities, and especially with disability. I think environmentally, it's very one way. And I think if I'm a big supporter of universal design, I think that we'll all realize that we're all connected and we all have the same basic human condition.
Yes. That was beautifully said, beautifully said. And before I let Kip talk, and I can't wait for Kip to talk because it's going to be brilliant, but I was on television and they were asking me about some of the women's movements. And obviously I'm a woman and I really care about the women's movement, the Me Too. And unfortunately I have my own Me Too stories like many other women, but I had said one thing that I want to see us do a better job of with all these amazing, powerful movements is to really have diversity be a little bit more visible. And I said, in these situations, it's powerful to have someone like me there talking, but I don't have a physical disability. And I said, what you should do is you should find a woman, maybe an African-American woman that has a disability, and let her talk. And boy, I know a wonderful woman that would add to these conversations. So Victoria Duggar, remember her name, but Kip, we want to hear from you. So tell us what you think about these conversations we're having.
Yeah, I think these are absolutely wonderful conversations to have. One thing that really stood out to me that you said was the comment you made about the faith-based communities' interactions with people with disability. How oftentimes people in faith-based communities approach disability as something in regards to brokenness. I'm a Christian. I absolutely love God and greatly value my relationship with Jesus. And while it is true that I am greatly awaiting the day when I'll have a new body, here I don't want other people to tell me that I'm not complete currently, simply because of my disability. I think that one thing that's important to remember is that all people are broken, and that just because my brokenness is exhibited on the outside doesn't mean that I'm any weaker or any less human or any less capable than people whose brokenness is not on the outside. I think that that everyone is just as qualified and also just as in need of help as everyone with disability. And I think that when people in faith-based communities don't take that approach, that it can be detrimental to allowing people with disabilities to enter those communities. And I think it's important to let people with disability start the conversation and and for others to approach the topic, and not just in faith-based communities, but all people, to approach the topic with humility, and to realize that you are not the expert on what it's like to be them. I would much rather tell you who I am as a person and what I can and can't do than for you to assume those things about me or to assume that I'm not comfortable who I am. And I would much rather be able to tell you I need prayer for this, I need prayer for that, or I can do this or I can't do that, instead of you assuming what I need help with based on what's immediately visible to you.
Wow. I know that Victoria wants to we have a little chat window in the back, and Victoria says she wants to comment on this, and I want you to comment on it, but I want to throw something else at both of you. So Victoria, I'm going to turn it over to you to comment, and then I want to send it back to Kip. But while you're commenting, I'd like you both to comment on inspirational porn, because I can't help, I'm going to tell both of you, I'm sorry, I can't help but be inspired by you. I'm inspired by you, not because of disability, but because I'm a wannabe artist. And I dabble in paint, and I won't show them to you. My mother loved me so much that I painted in acrylics, and she hung it up on her wall, which it wasn't hangable art, but I enjoy doing it. So I'm inspired by you both, by the brilliance of your conversations and because of your artist abilities. But at the same time, Victoria, comment, but if you don't mind, also addressing inspirational porn.
Of course. So I thought what Kip said was so beautiful and so poignant that, just because people with disabilities aren't able to necessarily hide them, that they're a bit more obvious, it doesn't mean that that we're any less than or I don't want to use the term worthless, but aren't contributing members of society. And I think that, I don't know, I really, I think what we need more is empathy, and empathy towards one another, empathy with other people. And I think that would do a lot of good. And yeah, I don't know, that was wonderful. And talking about inspirational porn, it's really funny. I saw that TED Talk many years ago, before the Kennedy Center, and just kind of thinking about how people have come up to me and been like, man, wow, you're such an inspiration. And I'm like, I'm at the grocery store wearing pajamas. I don't know how inspiring that is. But yeah, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I do want to show people that people with disabilities are capable, are members of society, are, really are here to stay, obviously. But at the same time, it's like, I don't need validation also to make someone else feel better. But aren't we all kind of here to make other people feel better? And I see inspiring things all the time, and I'm like, wow, that made me feel so much better. I needed that today. So what my mom always would tell me when I was younger is that you don't know what people go through. And I try to, every time I meet someone, I try to really have that in the back of my in the back of my mind. Because you don't necessarily know what someone's going through. And if they're saying that to you, you don't necessarily know if it's coming from condescending place or a place of admiration. Because I've also been in those shoes. So I don't know. I feel I'm on the fence with inspiration porn. But thank you, Deborah, for saying that you're inspired by my artwork. I felt very much validated by the Kennedy Center, since that was kind of a new sculpture was a new venture for me in my artistic career, as you would say. Yeah.
Well said. Kip?
Thank you.
Yeah, so I really appreciated what Victoria had to say about it being a double-edged sword, in that the nature of my disability is that I was born with it. And I think that a lot of pain comes from loss and from losing something that you previously had. And so in one sense, I just haven't experienced a ton of that type of pain in my life. I've had dozens of surgeries, and that's enough physical pain for anybody. But at the same time, there's people who become paralyzed or become disabled, and that's an entirely different story. I've never felt that type of loss because I was born with it. So, in one sense, I've had just, I mean, obviously not an easy life, but like my family life is great. I'm comfortable with who I am. I have a lot of stuff going for me, and I don't want people to assume that just because some of my weaknesses are visible to other people, that I've had a harder time of it than others, because I haven't gone through loss. I haven't gone through some of the stuff that other people have gone through. And so for me, when I think there's appropriate times for people to be inspired, and there's not appropriate times. If your only interaction with me ever is, wow, I'm inspired by you, every time you see me, I feel like I'm being put in a box. I feel like my disability is being used solely to serve you so that you can be inspired, and you're negating the other parts of my life. And at that point, it becomes selfish on the other person's end.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if for example, when I was 5, I regained the use of my voice, and I publicly thanked my church for praying for me in front of them with the microphone, and that was the right time to be inspired, because it was a beautiful moment of restoration, and you could see what I had gone through to get to that point. But just day-to-day life, I agree that inspiration is can often be a box that disabled people are put into.
Yes, and, I agree.
Deborah, it's
yes.
Betty. Can I jump in just really quick?
Yes.
Because the whole discussion around inspiration is really interesting, especially when you attach it back to the artwork that they're working on. So we want to look at art through the lens of how it can impact all of us. And I walk away from a lot of art exhibits feeling sometimes inspired, sometimes depressed, sometimes excited, sometimes thinking, oh, I could do that. And then sometimes thinking, I could never do that. But one of the interesting things about the VSA VW Emerging Young Artists program, which I think Victoria has experienced, but Kip hasn't, is that we do try to send the artists out into the field with the art exhibit so that we know that the artwork can speak for itself, right? That's why these young artists were selected out of many, 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 many hundreds of artists. They rose to the top because their artwork alone spoke to us in some way. Because when this competition, because it is indeed a competition, is adjudicated, the adjudicators don't know anything about the artist. They don't know their names. They don't know their ages. They don't know anything about their disability. All we ask them to do is look at the art and say, is this good, amazing quality? Is this high caliber work by a young artist? And that's what we're asking them to evaluate and assess. It's only later on that they find out more about the individual artist, and then we want to take advantage of the artist to be able to send them out with the artwork so that they can get to the local community. So Victoria, I think you did I think you went out with the exhibit and you did a class with some students. And in that case, I think being inspired is important. We are deliberately choosing to put the artist with a disability out there in society so that young artists, maybe young artists with disabilities, can have a moment where they go, I didn't know that there was anybody else like me out there. And now I have this role model. And if a role model is inspirational, I think that's a very positive way of being inspiring. So Victoria, maybe you can talk about that experience.
Yeah, definitely. I went to Rochester Institute of Technology. I think it was in March of 2017. And it was such an amazing experience to be there with the exhibit. And I had a workshop with a class that was from a local deaf school, a local deaf elementary school. And it kind of reminded me of how I was, and I had really inspirational people to look up to who had disabilities and who were beautiful and lived on their own and drove their own car and had a career. And I kind of forgot about that in a way until I see kids that are younger. And I'm like, wow, that was so impactful on my life without even realizing that seeing a disabled person being capable and living their life and most importantly, being independent and whatever independency looks like specifically for that person. So it was very much a highlight to go with my mom, who has always been such a supporter of me and has always really pushed me to be more independent and to do things on my own and to encourage me. And I think being on the other side of that was really, I don't know, came full circle for me.
Yes, it's very exciting. All right, so I know we're sort of out of time, but this is just too delicious of a conversation. But so I want to ask Kip and Victoria one more question, and then what we're going to do is I want you to tell people, and I want to go, Betty, you do it again also, but I want you to tell people how they can find out about your work, your websites, your social media presence. I want the audience to know how to find you. But my last question for Kip and Victoria, and Betty, you're more than welcome to weigh in on this, is what are your hopes for the future and about true inclusion and of people with disabilities and just the society starting to understand that we're all human beings. We all have abilities and disabilities. So what's your hope for the future? And Victoria, how about if we start with you and then we'll pass it to Kip? And Betty, if you want to make a comment, we can pass it to you. Sure.
Awesome, thank you. So I think more than ever, we're recognizing people's differences and celebrating people's differences and people being comforting and shouting that I'm different and I'm worthy and I'm capable. I'm a person just like you and I. And I think, I don't know, I'm not sure what the next steps would be, but I think if we kind of keep this idea of togetherness and self-worth being really integral to our society. I know that things are quite dismal looking these days, but I think at the same time they're I don't know, really surprising in that people are really accepting. And I've never felt more accepted from myself, most importantly, and from other people. Should I answer the social media question later, or?
Yeah, what I'll do is we'll give the mic to Kip, and then Betty, if she wants to make a comment, and then we'll then I want to make sure the audience knows how to find your work.
Awesome. Okay.
Kip, you want to go next?
Yeah. Just personally for the future, I'm working really hard on the comic book for Zach King. He has a huge fan base, so hopefully people will respond well to the comic, and that'll get distributed worldwide. And so I'm really excited about that coming up. As far as goals for disability and diversity, one thing that I've noticed is it's a lot easier, at least my experience, it's a lot easier to be an adult with disability than it is to be a kid with disability. As an adult, people assume that I just am capable, and so I don't have that barrier to go through as much. But as a kid, people did not always assume that I was fully capable of, or didn't allow me to tell them what I was capable of. Yeah, I'm really passionate about finding ways to let other people know how to interact with kids with disability, how to make them feel validated and capable to do precisely what they can without insulting their abilities.
Ooh, good one. Betty, did you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, well, I have lots of hopes for the future, but one of course, a selfish hope is that as we open our next exhibit and on our next call, which you can find out about at the Kennedy Center's website, that we identify another group of 15 artists that include amazing folks like Kip and Victoria, so that we can continue through the generosity of VW Group of America to encourage other corporate citizens, because we have conferred citizenship on corporations in the United States, that we get more corporate citizens willing to step up with philanthropy, not charity, because I'm not interested in patting anybody on the head and giving them charity. These artists compete and they win because of the quality of their work. And we'd like to see other corporations step up, just like VW Group of America has done, to support work by amazing artists. And I'm happy to talk to anybody about that at any time for the future, because we have so many more people than the 15 VW artists, like I said, our musicians, our playwrights, etc., that could benefit from the types of experiences that we're able to provide to artists, visual artists like Victoria and Kip. So I hope to see more of that really true citizen supports corporate spirit going towards philanthropy to support artists with disabilities of all type. And then I really hope that the artwork that we send out on tour and the artwork that Kip and Victoria and our other artists are doing do inspire society to be more inclusive and recognize the validity of all those voices and all the intersectionality of our society and the depths and complexity, as Victoria said, that it brings to us is just really dynamic. So thank you.
I agree. And I would also say, and then I think we should all consider buying VW cars. Remember,
I think VW would give me a car.
Right. We have to support the corporate brands that are supporting us. And so VW is supporting the Kennedy Center and these artists. Let's go and tell them why we're buying their cars and why we're not buying other cars. So I'll just say that. But all right, and I know I've gone way over, but Betty, real quick, will you remind us of your website and your social media handles, and then we'll go to Kip and Victoria.
Sure. The best way to find us is at www.kennedy-center.org. Click on education and then on VSA and accessibility. Or you can find us on Facebook. It's a great way to hear about the announcements for the next competition at VSA International on Facebook.
Kip, you want to go next? Sure. I have a website, www.kiphendersonart. And you can sign up for my newsletter there, where I post what I'm up to. And you can check out all the cool artwork that I have on that site. Or you can follow me on Instagram at Kipper, KIPPER .doodles, DOODLES.
Cool. And Victoria?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, which is victoria.dugger, DUGGER.studio. And my website primarily is where I put most of my artwork, is where all of my artwork is Victoria Dugger, DUGGER.studio.
And what we'll do is we'll make sure that we send links to, we'll provide all this links on our website as we post it. And I'm going to ask Kip and Victoria to make sure that they send me announcements about when the magazine comes out, because we should all go and buy this magazine that Kip is doing, and also support Victoria's work. So once again, we're a community that cares about each other, so let's support what they're doing at the Kennedy Center and support artists like Victoria and Kip, and let's continue these powerful conversations. So thank you to everybody. Sorry we went long, but I bet you agree with me in that we could have talked about this for hours. So thank you, Betty, Victoria, and Kip, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.